Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. In today's interview, I have Andreas Winas from Manolo.se in Sweden, and he's going to share his approach to style and what he learned over the years. Welcome, Andreas.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. Andreas, you are how old?
I'm 30 this year, actually. So in September, big 30.
Wonderful. And I read about you that you went to a textile college and that you then got a degree in textile and business. And you also used to be a professional handball player. Is that right?
Yeah, that is quite a contrast, to be honest. But yeah, my life was pretty much professional handball for around 15 years. And then slowly but steady, my interest and my passion for menswear and clothing took more and more time, and handball is not paying like football or ice hockey in Sweden, even if you're playing at a professional level. So at one time
So it was difficult to make a living with handball, basically. And I think you discovered the world of men's style at a later age, or not a later age,
Absolutely.
But you were like 20, early 20s. Is that right?
Exactly. I think early 20s, and as a lot of other guys, it started off with trends and more fashion. And I think I got a little bit sick of being a punk rocker one season and a preppy guy the next. And for me, that was, I realized that the more I'm not extremely classic, but the more classic look tended to have a longer period before it changes. So
okay. Oh, and that's very true. But you mentioned punk and preppy. Was that really like the way you dressed?
Well, not really, but sure, it could be like a bomber jacket one season that I thought was so nice, and then, I mean, in Sweden the preppy trend was extreme during, I think it was 2007, 2008, something like that. And I mean, I respect the trend because the history of the look, it has genuine parts, but when everyone is wearing a bow tie with like a NATO strap in color and roll up jeans, then kind of loses its.
Yeah, it lacks the individualism, right? If everybody wears one style, it's no style, basically. Okay.
A little bit like that, yeah.
But so, basically you came from professional sports, then you kind of developed this interest in style. And how did you end up at the textile school then?
Yeah, my options was either studying business and economics normally in Gothenburg, and then I found this in Borås, actually outside of Gothenburg, where pretty much the textile mecca of Sweden was back in the 60s and the 50s.
Okay.
And that was perfect. Of course, you're not learning about bespoke suits. You're learning about fabrics that are more used in today's, in H&M and Zara.
Commercial, large-scale production, right? It's not like when you start, you think, oh, there are all these nice suits and everything, but then you realize, oh, we're talking about the weaves of white cotton and how you can reduce the price and still maintain a certain level of quality. So it's less romantic than what I think.
Yeah, but still, it was very. I learned a lot.
But so you mentioned Manolo. Tell us about Manolo. What is Manolo?
Well, Manolo is in Sweden the largest menswear site about, style guide, focusing on quality, craftsmanship, and classic style with a modern take, so to speak.
And it's written in Swedish only, is that right?
100% Swedish.
Okay. So how many visitors do you attract per month?
We have around 25 to 30,000 a week and a little over 50,000 a month.
That's
And
fantastic, especially considering how many people live in Sweden.
I think 9 million now, perhaps. But
Okay. So the market is rather limited compared to,
definitely,
writing in English. I mean, it's much smaller.
I'm the executive editor, so I am responsible for the budget and for our freelance writers and for the everyday content, pretty much, of the site.
Wow. So did you start at that position in Manolo, or how did you work your way there?
Yeah, after I graduated from school, I was contacted by the publisher called Egmont, which is I think is one of the top 3 publishers in Sweden.
Hmm.
They own King Magazine, which is a fashion magazine in Sweden, and Manolo, which is the sister or brother site to King, with a more sartorial focus.
Is that a print
And
magazine too, or just online?
no, Manolo is only online, but King Magazine is a print.
Okay.
So I was offered the full-time editorship of Manolo, and also a 20%. I divide my time 80% on Manolo and 20% on the King Magazine. So I focus on I'm the watch editor of the print magazine also.
Okay, wonderful. I mean, you already alluded to it, but what would you say are the core values of Manolo compared to King?
It's definitely a little bit more dressed up, but it's not 100% suit and tie. It's about quality over quantity, I would say. To go in depth about construction and fabric and consistency and sustainability, that you could buy something actually for the years to come, for use over 10, 15 years instead of 10, 15 months, I think.
Exactly, because just like the impact you mentioned, sustainability, right? I mean, it's not very environmentally friendly to grow cotton, even if it's organic.
Not at all.
It just uses a lot of resources. The dyeing is not really friendly, and if you can wear something 15 years rather than 15 months, you have just gotten so much more value, and you didn't waste all that water and the dye on like 12 different pieces, but just one.
I
So
agree.
that's a big advantage.
I agree.
So even though I don't speak Swedish, I sometimes go to Manolo and just use a translate function to see what's going on. And your most popular post, in my opinion, is probably the Fredag-inspirationen.
Yeah,
which means
the
like Friday inspiration. I probably pronounced it wrong, but
but it was okay. It's been a tradition at Manolo for way before I started in 2013. I mean, my predecessor started it, I think, 2007 or something. So every Friday for over I think it's 10 years. So it's a cool thing.
No, it's really great, and probably I'm sure your readers love it. So I was wondering, how do you determine what you feature every Friday? How long does it take you? Do you just create 10 outfits every like 10 weeks, or do you just do it on Thursday night, or how does that come together?
It depends. It could be both, actually. During a certain period, you can get super inspired and do 2-3 of them at the same day, pretty much. But it could also be done very much in the last second if you're not that inspired for the moment. But yeah, I try to focus on everything from, it could be just something like a color or a decade.
So now I'd like to talk a little bit more about your style. I think you have a very interesting style, and it's going through your Instagram profile. I would sum it up as classic reinterpreted, right? You take classic colors, you take classic garments, and you try to go with muted things like a dark orange, burgundy, bottle green. But then in terms of cut, you like a very slim cut pair of trousers, not too long, no break necessarily, and like softer garments. How would you describe your style?
I think you are pretty much spot on, but that is correct. I think it's a big problem when you have to choose between either being a conservative classical menswear in that camp, so to speak, or you have to be the sprezzatura or the trend menswear or even trend fashionable guy. I think, I mean, you can be inspired from the benefits of a cut in the bespoke suits because they have, I mean, that craft is pretty much perfected over centuries. But I still think that you could combine that with personal and even modern influences without, you don't have to do like in the 30s just because you like some part of it. So I think that's what personal style is all about. You're influenced by modern trends, and then
Absolutely.
you decide yourself which ones are relevant for you. Even with the classic rules to dressing, I mean, some of them really makes a good point still today, and some of them are completely useless. So
For
I think it's a
example,
good,
give us some specifics.
well, I mean, wearing white after Labor Day, I think that for me personally, the only reason why I wouldn't wear white is because it would be a really rainy day outside or something. And that doesn't matter if it's summer or winter. With a crisp, sunny winter day, I would love to wear white trousers. If, I mean, as long, maybe not linen because it's too cold, but
A nice pair of flannels, right? Winter white
exactly,
flannels.
exactly.
Wonderful.
And brown shoes after 6, that's just, I mean, obvious, I think.
Oh, yes.
But still, I love black shoes, and I think there are some situations where a black shoe is absolutely the best choice. So, I mean, know the rules, but still question them and question the relevance for you, I think.
So, another thing about your style that I think stands out is your beard. For how many years have you been a beardsman?
Well, that has definitely been at least 10 years now. I think even more. Since I was able to grow one, to be
Oh,
honest.
wow. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. I
So,
I don't know why, but I think it was at first I think I looked too young without it. So I started to have it. And then the big beard trend came to the world again and got like hooked in that as well. And then that trend, everyone was saying, "Oh, don't you know the trend is over?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's great. Now I can keep my beard. That's no problem."
no, I can
But
be me again, and I mean, like you said, you had it for 10 years. That was
yeah,
before that kind of hipster urban beardsman uh,
yeah.
trend came up. But
But it's been shorter and it's been longer. I mean, depending on time and preference.
okay, all right.
For the wedding, I actually got a clean shave.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. That's interesting though,
Oh,
because you have the beard all the time, and then you
yeah, I
just
know.
take it off. Were you surprised when you shaved it off how you looked, or
Oh,
was
yes.
it?
Yes, absolutely. I was 8 years younger.
And your wife,
Yeah,
did she recognize you? Has she seen you with the other beard before?
yeah, she has.
All right. Um, Before you mentioned, you had more than 15 suits. So I was
Yeah.
wondering, looking at all of them, what are the most worn pieces in your wardrobe?
Oh, I would say definitely. I have a blue Atolini suit in bird's eye wool that is a made-to-measure suit that is the pinnacle of my wardrobe. I love it.
Dude, there can be like gems in other places, but you have to kind of, I guess, you have to understand quality, right? And that's what I, at the Gentleman's Gazette and Fort Belvedere, we always try to say, hey, it's quality and style. And if you
Yeah.
know those two things, you can see it even if there's no brand name on it. It's just that little craftsman somewhere. But if you see it, you're like, oh wow, this is good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So
And
how would you say, how important is quality in your life?
quality, I think it's the foundation of the garments, of food, of everything. The key, quality over quantity every time. But on the other hand, as I said before, the quality doesn't matter at all if the aesthetics is not there, because then you won't use it and then the quality won't be appreciated.
So where would you say do you buy your clothes? You mentioned a few tailors, but what about, your shirts and your other things? What are brands or things that you would like to mention here?
Some people are very keen on having shirts made to measure or with the highest possible quality. Shirts is actually one of the products that I would consider buying at a little lower price range, because it's basically, you wear them quite frequently next to your body. It has to be washed, and I have had some problematic experience with really fine shirts that have shrink to the extent that they're not, they're too short to be worn with the jackets that you want to wear them with.
Really? That's interesting.
The sleeve length was
Terrible.
2 centimeters off. So, and I mean, it's still a great shirt, but doesn't happen with jackets. So I would rather spend a little bit more on the perfect fit for the jacket. And perhaps, I'm not saying I'm not buying, I would never buy shirts with a bad quality, but if I had to prioritize, I would go for jackets and shoes as the premium.
Okay. So what shoe brands do you go for?
Well, the best ones, in my opinion, are St. Crispin's. That's mainly because I have a pronation problem with my feet. It's not a big problem, but I fall in, so to speak, when I walk, and they have, in my opinion, the best arch support for a non-bespoke shoe. And yeah, they are really expensive, but the style, the materials, the construction, and that arch support is, in my opinion, unrivaled at their price range.
Exactly. So the other thing I wanted to mention about shirts was, what I've noticed with shirts, sometimes, there's a trend now to hand-sewn shirts. Everything is handmade. And while I can appreciate the craftsmanship and quality in a machine, sometimes when you wash it, a machine-sewn seam is actually sturdier than a hand-sewn seam. The hand-sewn may be nicer, maybe more flexible, and on a jacket, that is really great. But on a shirt, sometimes I feel like the machine stitching can be superior to hand stitching.
I agree with you. I think hand stitching in many cases with shirts is more of a marketing gimmick.
I think I'd prefer the machine buttonhole on a shirt simply because it's going to last longer. On a jacket, I always go for the handmade buttonholes.
Yeah, same here. And I think the handmade details in a jacket, except for buttonholes and stuff like that, but it's really a good point of using hand labor, because there are so many parts of making a jacket that really gets better made by hand. Everything from pressing the jacket to shoulders, and not to mention the canvas, hand padded. I mean, there's a reason why bespoke tailors hand pad the canvas instead of machine padded. But
so, what are your style pet peeves?
ooh, yeah, I did like an article about this a couple of weeks back on Manolo, like my 10 commandments, like how I think. It's not for that I think people are doing it wrong if they break these. It's just my personal. And I think
when they come meet you at the Manolo events, they should read this list beforehand.
Exactly. I tend to, I never wear a lighter tie than the shirt. That is something I just don't, I really don't like that. I can't motivate why. I think it's just that the tie really sticks out in a bad way if it's lighter than the shirt color. It can be
Interesting.
lighter than the jacket, but not lighter than the shirt.
Okay. All right. So that's one of them. What about the
And
other nine?
well, exactly, I have to remember them. But I think, yeah, it's, I tend to, I don't want too much contrast in my outfit. I mean, unless it's a very with a dark suit and a white tie is appropriate. If I wear odd trousers, I like, for example, to wear, if I have a mid-gray trouser, I like the jacket. No matter which color, it should not be too dark or too light. It should complement in the same tone.
Interesting. But that's,
Yeah,
that's also a personal thing, right? If you're more of a high contrast
fair
person
enough.
or low contrast will work better for you than if you are
Yeah,
like I can wear probably higher contrast better than you can. But it seems like it's a personal thing of
definitely.
yours that you don't go with the really charcoal and crisp white shirt. I mean, I rarely see you wearing that.
I not that often, and I still think that if there's a dress code that says like a formal suit or something like that, then of course, I mean, it's also, I always try to wear at least one pattern
Uh-huh.
in my outfit. It doesn't have to be
Bold.
in, yeah, exactly, but it could be, if I have a pinstripe suit, then I could have a plain shirt and a plain tie, but not a plain suit, plain tie, and plain jacket, because I like something to pop.
Describe, the difference between a vintage watch and a new watch, and why do you prefer the vintage?
I like vintage watches because every single one has developed their own character, especially from the 60s and 70s, where the luminous have changed. So there's not one that looks like another. Everyone has developed in different ways that I think is superb. And I think also there's something about, you cannot just go out and buy it. I mean, with a new watch, doesn't really matter the price. If you have the money, you pretty much, yeah, you can get it.
Yeah.
With vintage watches, it's much more of the search to get that exact model or example, yeah, in the right price and in the right condition. So it's much more fun, I think.
It's more of a hunt, right?
Yeah, exactly. And last but not least is, I have quite tiny wrists, so I really prefer the smaller size watches of
That's a very
50.
good point. Like the dials have become so big and the older ones are
Exactly.
just smaller, and then it just looks better on your wrist. Okay.
Yeah, that's, I think, the main reasons. They're fantastic watches made in the last century that I think is very still undervalued. I mean, there's a lot vintage watches that are overvalued, in my opinion, as well. I mean, the Rolex Daytona, they couldn't sell it for 10 years retail, and now
Exactly.
it's worth.
Then the right marketing, and we did an article about that.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? I mean, a watch that's sold for not even $1,000 now is like $250,000.
Yeah.
It's just like good marketing.
Yeah, very much, absolutely. And I mean, everyone, it's up to you. I mean, if you like the watch, I'm not saying it's been proven a great investment for those who have bought one. So
Exactly.
but I mean, there's a lot of nice vintage watches that are very, very low price compared to the quality, actually.
So specifically, what are those watches?
I would look for like Universal Geneva. I think Universal is great. I think there's still some nice Omegas out there, even though Omega is not a sleeper anymore, so to speak, as it was a couple of years ago. I think even though Vacheron Constantin is an expensive watchmaker, I think the smaller dress watches from the 60s and the 70s is extremely price worthy compared to if there were Patek on the dial, then would be at least 10 or 15 times as much.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing. I think that's a good insight. So usually we close our interview with just some quick questions, and you can explain or you can say something else, but it's just to gives a quick overview of what you prefer in your style. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So Oxford or Derby?
Oxfords, definitely. I mean, it's so elegant. I like Derbys as well, definitely, but I think it's the ultimate menswear shoe.
Okay.
Depending
Flannel or worsted?
Flannel, definitely flannel. Except for the summer, flannel. I love the texture. It's perfect.
Okay. Necktie or bow tie?
Necktie for me. I think it's cool, but bow ties, I'm not man enough for it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Belt or suspenders?
Depends on the occasion, but I think I wear belts a little bit more. But I think suspenders are better in terms of function, because and stand and sit and stand during meetings. When I get up, the place is exactly where it should be with suspenders. With belts, it tend to, go down and then it won't go up again. So suspenders is a great thing. It's just not with every jacket and suit.
Not with every look. Okay. Barrel cuff or French cuff?
Barrel cuff. I wear them much more. I think it's very nice with a French cuff, but I only wear those for more formal suits.
Okay. Undershirt or no undershirt?
No undershirt. Never. I never really understood that. I mean, maybe if it's so hot outside that you need like a undershirt to take up the sweat, but in my opinion, it's just close the jacket and pretend like nothing happened.
Yeah. At the
better.
same time, I think if you wear like a formal, like formal stuff like white tie or black tech with a starched shirt front, an undershirt will be much better on your skin than having that starched Marcelo.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just my take on it. Each to his
own.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Off the rack or custom?
Custom, always custom. Mostly for the possibility to do what you really want. I mean, not just the quality, but the color, the cut, the length, the style. No compromise.
All right. So what can we expect from Andreas Wieners in 2016 and beyond?
To do my best of giving you guys some hopefully entertaining articles and inspiration.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Andreas. It was a true pleasure. I enjoyed your different take on things, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye.